So next, let's look at a couple of things. If I go to a realistic view, let's look at it. It looks pretty smooth, right? It looks like there's maybe a little bit of texture in there. But let's see if we can adjust that a little more with a feature you probably haven't used in Revit yet. Let's go to the edit type and go back to our material and go to our aluminum panel. And let's go to the appearance tab again. And I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can kind of work between both. Now, if we had time, we'd get into all these different areas of change. And we've already worked with the transparency a little bit when we were working on curtain walls and changing the color of glass and changing the transparency. But here's this one maybe you've been curious about called bump. And what the bump does, it displays more texture on the material. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do, right, before I do anything here, I am going to separate some images really quick, okay? So what you're going to have to do individually is to go out on the V drive under under classes and our architecture 255 under your materials directory, exercises materials. What I want you to do is take this aluminum panel and right click on it and go copy and then paste and then rename that to aluminum panel dash bump, right? Now I have a bump pattern out there. It's the same file, but I like to keep them separate. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go out and grab an image. Oh, let me click it. And I'm going to click on bump in that same folder. And what I'm going to do is leave the bump at 30 right now. I'm just going to leave it at 30 and hit apply and OK, and apply. And now maybe we can see that there's a little more, just a little more texture to the surface. Maybe, maybe not. Let's go in and try that again. Let's see if we can up that number some. So I'll go back in here and go to aluminum panel and go to appearance, right? And then I can maybe make that a little bigger, right? And then I can go to the bump and maybe I can take that bump up quite. See how that image changes up here when I adjust that? Remember? See how either way I go, it gets smoother or it gets less smooth. So let's look at a kind of a large variation just for a minute. Now look what happens when I do that. That's kind of way, way away from what I was going for. You see how it provided a little more of the texture of that pattern in there? Looks kind of odd though, doesn't it? But it provides a little bit of texture, right? So let's go back and change it from what it was. Obviously we wouldn't leave it that way. I would probably come in here and go to that edit type again, and if I go to that bump pattern, maybe I'll come in here and say let's make the bump, let's take it back and maybe make it 75, right? And hit apply and OK. And so that's more of a reasonable number that I can adjust it. And like I said, you can either adjust one direction or another to positive or negative values. And again, that's kind of to your taste, right? That's how you're going to actually, how you personally think something should look as opposed to how somebody else thinks it should look are completely two different things. And even if I came down here and changed to this ray trace mode, let's see what look we get when that happens. So if I was doing a rendering, this is a little closer to how this material would look, okay, if I was actually doing a rendering. So again, it's going to be up to you as to how far you go in one direction or another. Now, one last thing I want to talk to you about is as you look at under the shaded mode or even the realistic mode, you see how we've got this little line of the pattern at the edge of the wall? It looks a little odd. Maybe we can do something about that. Let's go back to a hidden view. if you go up to the Modify tab, if you click on the Align command, if I click on Align and I click on this wall here and then on that line, you see how it brings that to the edge. And then if I come in here and click on this wall, oh, I'm sorry, if I click on, let's try that. If I click on this wall and click Align, it brings that pattern to the edge. So now when I go back to a realistic mode, that corner, it meets that corner well. Now, obviously you can see down at the end of this wall, what has it done? It's put it on the other side. However, the way you're going to combat that is making wall patterns and also making what? Making sure that your 2x4 pattern is going to fit evenly into the length of a wall, if that makes sense. So let's go to a level 1 view and let's see if we can remedy that a little. What if I change this to be divisible by 4, divisible by 2, right? So 36 is divisible by 2. What's this other one? Let's see. 46 is divisible by 2. But what if I put something like 48, and here I put something like 24? Let's see if that changes it any. It aligns it here, but if I go down here and try and do the same thing, shift middle mouse, and I want these corners to align, and I go back to a hidden view. And again, these are things you kind of have to plan with your material as well. You know, you're going to end up kind of moving that back and forth. So what you have to ask yourself sometimes, if you can't make that image that you bought in and you're not great at editing images in Photoshop or something, ask yourself, what view do I want to take my rendering from? Okay, and if this is the view, then if you make sure that corner looks okay, when you do that and you go to a realistic view and you take your, for instance, in a plan view, what if I say I want my camera from this angle, right? And then I come in here and say that's where I'm going to shoot my rendering from, and I say I want that corner to look even. I can hold down shift and turn that a little so you really can't see the end of the other wall. Then I can go back into the align command and kind of zoom in and try to say align to here, this wall, this image. And now in that view, you've got those panels looking like they're coming right together at the end. And so again, it's going to be a little trial and error in playing, but getting used to being able to look at these different patterns and use different materials is what's going to be important to you developing as someone who can apply certain materials to buildings. And the same is true to floors. We can do the same thing with a floor in Revit as well. It just kind of goes horizontally as opposed to a wall being vertically. So I'm going to go ahead and save this video, and we'll stop here. Your assignment, as it is in Blackboard, is going to be to go into your folders. If you go into your folders that I provided you on the network, what you're going to find is that I provided each and every one of you with your own personal, under the exercises materials folder, additional material images. There's probably about 12 to 15 images in here, and you can go through each one of them. Matter of fact, I'll just go here and go to view and say, let's look at large icons. You're going to pick about 5, I believe it asks you to pick 5, either 3 or 5 of these materials, and make your own material to apply to that surface in Revit. Okay, and so that's what I want you to work on for that assignment. The last thing I want to show you is something else. I'm going to show you a feature that perhaps you didn't know existed. We're going to draw another little object over here, and we're just going to draw it on the regular generic walls. And when I go to a 3D view, I see that there. Now, if I don't want to change that wall to an aluminum panel wall, I can use a feature under the Modify tab here that's called Paint. It's really easy to miss. But if I say I want to paint this and it pulls up the materials, look at this. I can click on aluminum panel and say paint that wall in aluminum panel. I can also say, oh, you know, that one's aluminum panel. Maybe I want to paint another one to look like oak flooring. And now that looks like oak flooring. Any material that you create in Revit, you can paint that surface and have no fear. As quickly as you paint it, you can remove that paint as well. So instead of, in an instance where you don't want to apply or create a material or create a wall type that has that material integrated in it like this one is, right? You can go up to the paint command and you can paint this anything you want. Like I can paint those walls so that they're translucent. The transparency is raised on that mass zone material, but it's just a paint. As quickly as I can put it on, I can remove it as well. Okay? All right.